Assassin's Creed Shadows is the latest game in Ubisoft's franchise, and it's a game that has been eagerly awaited, both from people looking to enjoy it and people looking to criticize it. Frankly, there's a lot of negativity around this game, and a decent amount of that is nothing more than clickbait titles from tantrum artists on YouTube. That is, creators that make their money by being over the top negative about every game they play. My goal here is to give you a fair and honest assessment of the game and my experience with it. Take that for what it's worth. But the question I'm trying to answer here is Assassin's Creed Shadows the feudal Japanese game that we've been waiting for, or is it just another one of Ubisoft's disappointing missteps? I'm going to give you my thoughts now, but let me know what you think in the comment section below. Are you playing the game, and if so, are you enjoying it, and why? To be clear, I have deliberately made this review well before completion, and the reason for that is because most gamers will make the decision to commit to a game within the first 5 to 10 hours. This is where a title has the potential to grab you and pull you in, or turn you off because it's not that good. It's a critical timestamp in any game. I'll obviously post a new review once I have finished the game, and with that said, let's get started. But first, make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. In terms of setting and story, we all know the game is set in feudal Japan and that the game features two protagonists, with Naoe the shinobi and Yasuke the samurai warrior, or the warrior if you prefer. I am going to go with Ubisoft's terms, but how does that story actually play out? First of all, I highly recommend playing the game in immersive mode where the scripting is all in Japanese and Portuguese. It adds a lot of immersion, although it has the downside of reading subtitles the whole time, and sometimes these can go by pretty quickly with no good way to rewind. Overall, the story for Naoe feels pretty good. I like her character development, with her transition from being wide-eyed and eager to more worldly, feeling pretty realistic. Her relationships with various characters, especially her father, feel authentic, at least for an Assassin's Creed game, and I'd say Naoe's story is fine, and I've enjoyed it quite a bit. With that said, Yasuke's story is okay at best, and I know there's a lot of controversy around the whole character, and I'm not going to go into the was he a samurai or not debate. I think that Ubi actually did a pretty good job of capturing what we know of Nobunaga. Nobunaga was known as a lord who was fascinated by unusual, exotic, and eccentric things, as well as physical prowess, and we do know that Yasuke was at least part of his retinue. So I don't think it's badly told, but the way it is inserted into the game just feels awkward most of the time. For example, the game starts out with Yasuke's story, fast forwards a few months, and then you don't play Yasuke again for hours and hours. It's also very weird that you do a whole combat tutorial with Yasuke, and then you have to do the same combat tutorials again with Naoe. It really just makes Yasuke feel more like a last minute addition to the game than a real co-protagonist. Closely linked to the setting and the story are the quests, and in general, these are pretty bland, go here and fetch or kill. There's a few different ones, like preparing for a tea ceremony where you investigate and try to figure out who the target is, and that is cool, but there are not enough quests like that, at least not early on, so even in the first 10 hours, you're going to start feeling that the quests are pretty repetitive, which is too bad because that tea ceremony quest shows that they can do something at least a little bit different, and they just chose not to. And considering that this was supposed to be a big groundbreaking title in the series, you'd think that they would have done a bit more to make quests feel unique and meaningful. In terms of gameplay and mechanics, Shadows doesn't really do that much new. Parkour is still a lot of fun for me. The addition of Naoe's grappling hook and the ability to grapple midair is pretty cool. I've had a lot of fun with that, but it's also been done in other games, so it loses a bit of its wow factor here. Stealth is alright, though the AI can still be slow to react and it can glitch out at times. However, this didn't happen nearly as much for me as I think some of the clickbait negativity channels want you to think. In 10 hours, I've had, I think, 2 instances where the AI just glitched out staring at my character, which isn't great, but it's not completely broken either. For reference, In Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, I have about 150 hours, and there's roughly the same amount of AI detection just glitching out completely. So I don't know what's going on, but it just seems like developers across the board are struggling with stealth and detection mechanics. Let me know what the last game you played was where the stealth system didn't glitch out on a pretty regular basis. I'd love to know because I'd love to play that game. Combat is okay, but not particularly challenging, but I don't think that's a big hit on the game because I don't think Assassin's Creed has ever had challenging combat. I would say that the combat in Shadows feels a bit harder than Valhalla due to the chaining attacks, unblockable attacks, and the relative squishiness of Naue, who you'll be playing for most of the first 10 to 15 hours of the game. I also found it harder than KCD2 simply because you have to watch each individual enemy as opposed to having one big green defend now icon flashing in the middle of your screen. Overall, the animations are cool too and the combat feels cinematic, but they're also very limited. You only get two kill animations with Naue's katana, as well as some animations for weak point hits and abilities. However, because you only have those two kill animations, they get old very, very fast, especially since it's an Assassin's Creed game and so it revolves heavily around killing enemies. 4 or 6 more kill animations would have done wonders to keep combat feeling different and cinematic, but if I have to watch now a backflip over somebody to slice their throat again, it's just going to drive me crazy. The game has a pretty expansive, diverse skill tree, and those are okay, but it isn't anything groundbreaking either. You have your basic trees to improve your ability to either assassinate enemies, use your gadgets or tools, and then your general combat trees. Once again, I don't think it's bad, but it's pretty much the same as it was in Valhalla or in Odyssey. I didn't play Mirage, so I can't comment on that game. That's why I don't mention it. You get your skill points from various tasks, most of which are exploring or killing enemies in the world. It's not too hard to do this, so leveling up isn't difficult. You also need to unlock skill tiers using knowledge points, which are generally earned by completing areas or by completing backstory memory quests. And that's alright because it does reward you for exploring the game and exploring Naue's backstory, but it can feel a bit like a chore at times. I wanted to upgrade a skill, so I had to deviate from the main story to go and assassinate my way through a random castle to get a knowledge point, and I don't know if that really furthers the gameplay very much, or if it's just a task that sends you off on a tangent and detracts from the actual storyline. Overall, I guess the progression is okay, but it's nothing groundbreaking, and it's pretty bog standard Assassin's Creed, just with a Japanese theme to it. The game world is very visually pleasing. I do enjoy the way that so much of it is destructible in Shadows. I found out actually that there's a pretty cool little feature where if you cut wood or bamboo with your katana, it does a pretty good job of chopping up the wood realistically, like where your katana actually hit it. And that's cool, but it doesn't really contribute a whole lot to the game since chopping wood does absolutely zero to advance the story. In addition, I also found some graphics glitches, like these poles that are levitating here, and the boats just look like they put extremely little effort into animating them. It looks bad, and I think it stands out more because so much else is done nicely in the game world. These glitches in areas that were just neglected stand out like a sore thumb. The seasons thing is also cool, but I feel like it's a bit underdeveloped. The concept is interesting, but it doesn't seem to affect anything other than aesthetics and a slight run debuff if you run through deep snow. It would have been nice to see maybe a few more survival type mechanics, even something as simple as Red Dead Redemption's 2 hot and cold weather outfits would have at least added a little bit more depth to the season mechanics. Other than that, items in the environments look as realistic as anything I've seen from Ubisoft, and I think overall the game world is a definite plus for Shadows. In terms of graphics and performance, I am running the game on Ultra, and I do have to say that it feels very well optimized. I know a lot of people have early release copies that had a lot of issues with crashes and freezes, but I think that was because they were playing on an early release copy. I haven't had any performance issues at all going through Sakai and Osaka. Those are the two areas new players are most likely to be in, and that was very nice. It's great to have a game world that looks good, has high detail, and still runs well. However, it's worth noting that I am playing on a pretty strong gaming PC. If you have a machine that isn't as up to date, you may have more issues, and I can't say anything for either of the console versions. Shadows is priced at $69.99 US dollars, which is notably more expensive than a lot of other new release titles. Frankly, this is kind of hard to justify because while I think the game is okay, it's definitely not a stunning, groundbreaking title either, which I guess is kind of a spoiler for my end score. Moreover, Ubisoft decided to try to monetize their game further by putting in microtransactions, and normally I wouldn't care because it's single player, and I thought it was going to have no real effect on the game. Basically, I thought it was going to be cosmetic only. However, what I have found is that gathering the resources to upgrade the buildings in your hideout is very tedious and grindy, and you can buy these resources in the cash shop, so yeah, it actually does affect the game. Granted, it's single player, so who cares? You could progress at your own pace, but I also feel like it's a scummy, out of touch cash grab move to put those transactions into the game, especially since it's now a pay to advance type of system instead of being purely cosmetic. Before I go into my own conclusions, I want to say something real quickly about the reviewers out there who are saying the game is broken or trash, and simply put, that is not true. And unfortunately, I think there's a segment in the content creator community that falls into the category of either A, pure negativity to drive viewership, or B, hating everything that's AAA and praising everything that is indie because it's cool to be against the system. To clarify this, every game has glitches and bugs. I have 150 hours in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is an absolutely amazing game. I could also go and put together a 10-minute montage of glitches and bugs and make a video about 10 minutes of why KCD 2 is trash and you shouldn't play it. And you could do that with basically every game out there. Just keep that in mind because just because a game has bugs or glitches doesn't mean that it's broken, trash, or unplayable, and this is especially true of open world games just because this format lends itself to a lot more room for error. So, with that said, my fair review of Shadows is a 75 out of 100. I think that the game overall is a very solid addition to the Assassin's Creed franchise, and if you are a fan of the franchise who enjoyed Valhalla and Odyssey, you'll probably enjoy Shadows as well. I think that it is good at all of the things that we generally associate with Assassin's Creed, and I think it's solidly above average in terms of the story, at least for now. I'm certainly having fun, and I will be putting some videos up on the channel. In fact, I'd give it an 80 or maybe even an 85 if Ubisoft hadn't tried to overhype it. But unfortunately, it was overhyped. Ubisoft basically tried to paint this as a franchise milestone or even a defining title in the franchise or in gaming, and it's just not that. In the first 10 hours, where you would expect to have those, oh wow, look at that new mechanic type of moments, there really isn't anything. You have seasons, I guess, but that's really just a cosmetic reskin of the world, which is cool and you admire it for a second or two, and then you go back to playing the game. And the game itself is really, in a lot of ways, a Japanese reskin of Valhalla or Odyssey, just without the ship combat. It does a good job of checking all the Assassin's Creed boxes, but there's no real wow factor or awesome new mechanics that make you think that the franchise is taking an exciting new direction. And while I like Naue more than I liked Eivor, I also don't like her as much as I liked Cassandra, which is probably a controversial statement, but that's my opinion. So overall, if you like Assassin's Creed, I'd recommend picking up this title. It is not a broken or unplayable game, as some of the negativity creators would have you believe. It's a decent game that is being hurt by a developer that significantly overhyped it. Ultimately, Shadows proves that Assassin's Creed still has life, despite Ubisoft trying to snuff that life out at every chance it gets.